Hey there everyone, my name is Luke. Welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. Today, in this episode, I'm basically discussing with you all bushcraft and outdoor advice. If you are someone who is looking to hone their bushcraft or outdoor skills, this is the video for you. Now before going any further, it is a windy day. I will try to edit that out. I have found this location here at Lone Wolf Mountain, which seems to be the most sheltered from the wind. So yeah, that is why I'm sitting right in the middle of the road. When it comes to the information and the tips that I'm about to share, these are points, these are elements, these are factors that you will discover on your own when you spend enough time in the outdoors. What you have to remember is that knowledge is information that will get you through any sort of event that you put yourself into. It doesn't matter if you're heading into the outdoors for a backpacking trip or you're coming out for a bushcraft adventure. You can take all of those skills, you can use them to help you along with your trip, and one day they may save your life in a survival situation. With this episode, I will be covering part 1 of my tips in regards to bushcraft specifically. And in the future, I will have additional episodes. I will be covering my philosophy of bushcraft, and do keep in mind that it may be different from yours, it may be different from others, and that's fine. Also, in this episode, I will be covering mistakes which experts make, and even other YouTubers. And with that being said, let's get to it with tip number 1. With tip number 1, this is extremely important. Focus on the task at hand. Focus on what you are doing. As soon as you begin your task, focus on it. Don't think about your girlfriend, don't think about your wife or your kids or your job. If you have a hatchet, think about that hatchet. Focus on the swing, the power, the control. As soon as you touch your knife or any other tool, clear your mind. Focus on what you are doing. This will assist you with not getting hurt. I do this every single time that I begin a chore. I clear my mind, I focus on what I have to do, and I haven't gotten hurt in over 30 years. Next up, we have a mistake that I've seen other YouTubers make. If you are out for a trip, you have a tarp, and you are collecting rainwater from that tarp, you have to be extremely careful. And you may want to reconsider collecting rainwater from your tarp or your tent. And that's because of this very simple fact. During the manufacturing process of most tents and tarps, they are treated with chemical agents that repel water and also are part of the manufacturing process itself. Those chemicals can be extremely dangerous and will slowly come off of each product over time as water runs over it. These chemicals may not make you sick immediately, they may not kill you, but over time, who knows what the ramifications are of ingesting those chemicals. With the chemical agents that are applied to tarps, tents, even rain jackets, oftentimes you will notice that as water collects on these, it can become foamy. It's soapy somewhat. So if you have a tarp and water is pooling, there are times where you'll notice these chemical agents. You can't see them by color or anything like that, but you can see how rain reacts with it. I mentioned this point specifically because I've seen other YouTubers talking about collecting rainwater from their tarps. Remember folks, not every tarp or shelter is created equal. Each has been created, manufactured differently. They may have been treated with different chemicals and whatnot. So keep that in mind. Next up, we have to talk about leaves and what lives underneath them, what lives within them. Without a doubt, leaves can be used as insulation from the ground. You can use it to stay warm, and you can also use it to make debris shelters. But there are aspects that you need to consider before doing so. I have a story to share with you all that goes back to when I was roughly 15 years old. I was out in the forest building a debris shelter, and I spent so much time bringing in the leaves, building this shelter. It was looking great. And when I finally got it done, I was standing there staring at my handiwork. The forest was silent, except for something. I could hear something. I could hear the leaves rustling just a little bit. I could hear movement. And I'm looking around, and my attention was drawn to my debris shelter. I got closer, really paid attention, and I noticed that the sound was coming from those leaves. Not just in one spot, but all over. And I started digging through this. And with the fact that I hate spiders, this gives me a chill to this day, I discovered that inside of those leaves are every single type of bug imaginable. If you are going to use leaves as insulation, well guess what? Bugs do the exact same thing. The point of this story, the point of this tip is this. Leaves and ground debris are home to millions of insects. We're talking about spiders, we're talking about ticks, we're talking about everything else that crawls and flies around. And in truth, it doesn't really matter which season that you're going to utilize leaves as insulation or make a debris shelter. You have to keep this in mind because there are going to be bugs present. Since I was a kid, I've been building debris shelters and I know exactly what crawls out of them, what comes down from them, so keep this in mind. In a survival situation, if you have to use leaves, you have to use debris as insulation to stay warm, do it. Do what you have to do. For bushcraft use, keep in mind what may be present. Take the proper steps to ensure your safety. You do not want Lyme disease. You do not want to get bitten by a poisonous spider. Have you ever seen what happens to the human body when it gets bitten by a poisonous spider? It's not nice. I'm not going to show you. You can look it up. You're not going to like it. So be careful. Talking about leaves and what lives underneath them, right here on this bank, it is leaf covered. And if I'm quiet, if I'm still, I can hear it moving. It's alive. The next topic of conversation deals with where to practice your bushcraft skills. This is a question that people ask me all the time. Luke, where can I go? Honestly, folks, the best location is at your home. The best location is on land that you own. If you can get permission to use someone else's land to do this, awesome. You may be wondering, what about national parks, forest systems, and whatnot? I have personally heard of people getting in big trouble for practicing bushcraft in those areas, especially those individuals who are destructive in nature when it comes to their skill sets. Bushcraft is one of those skills that, if done improperly, can be very destructive. And I will be talking about this in just a moment in more detail. Again, my best recommendation for practicing your own skills is to do it at home or on your property, family property, friends' property. Get permission. If none of that works for you and you have national forests nearby, park systems, contact them. Ask questions. You never know what you could work out. Before moving on to the next point, I want to throw this out there. Remember, folks, it doesn't matter what type of adventure that you're going on, leave no trace. It's very important. So if you go out, you build a bushcraft shelter, and it's not your property, tear it down when you're done. My next tip for you all is very simple, and this is something that I'm sure most people are aware of, but learn from your mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and oftentimes when you make a mistake, you learn from it. I do, every single time. And you can take that information and you can become a better bushcrafter. If someone says they have it all figured out, they never make any mistakes, they are full of crap, because we are humans. That is what we do. Don't be afraid to fail, and don't be hard on yourself when you fail. If you want to hone your bushcraft skills and your outdoor skills, that's how. A good example of failing over and over and over is with primitive fire making skills. And I'm not talking about a ferro rod, I'm talking with your hands. I tell you what, be prepared to fail over and over and over. You're not guaranteed anything in those sort of situations. Ask yourself, what did you do wrong? What could you do differently? And keep practicing. Next up, I want to talk about what is real and what is not. When it comes to reality shows, when it comes to even videos on YouTube, my best advice is to believe about half of what you see. If it's a reality show, believe even less, because so much of that is not realistic. Some of it is just flat out BS. And allow me to explain. Take the old reality shows such as Dual Survivor or Man vs. Wild and whatnot. Oftentimes with those shows, the main characters would demonstrate building these elaborate shelters, and they would make it look like it was done in the matter of minutes, and that's simply not the case when it comes to survival, and it's not the case with bushcraft either. If you've spent any time in the outdoors building your own shelters, you know that it's complete crap. That is not how it works. What you may not realize is that with those shows, there is an entire team of people supporting those actors, and they step in and they help build those shelters. Oftentimes there are survival experts for the areas that those individuals are in with them, helping them out, telling them what to do step by step. Of course, that's talking about reality shows specifically, but when it comes to any sort of video, they can be edited in any sort of way, and they can easily make the viewer believe one thing when it's not the case. There's a saying in the survival community and bushcraft community: if it looks too good to be true, it is. If it's too perfect, it's crap. And it's very true. When it comes to building a shelter by hand, you will realize very quickly how much time it takes, how much work it takes, and how, no, nothing is perfect. That's not how it works. That's not how it is at all. And that leads us to my next point. Time. Time is one of the most unrealized aspects to bushcraft or to outdoor chores. And you will be amazed at how much time even a mundane chore can take. For an example, building a shelter. Even a very simple shelter can take a ton of time. Of course, if you spend enough time in the outdoors practicing bushcraft and whatnot, you realize what I'm talking about. If not, you will. Collecting materials takes a ton of work. It may not appear so on video because of the editing, but what takes 5 minutes in a video can easily take 5 hours in real life. That's the reality of being in the outdoors. And let's talk about that for a second. What does a 5-hour shelter look like? It can look like utter crap. It really can. It really can. My advice is this: if you're going out for a bushcraft trip and you're building your own shelter, you better have a plan B just in case. What if the weather makes a change for the worse? It becomes super windy, or it gets cold, or it begins to rain heavily. What are you going to do? Let's say if right now I had to go out and build a survival shelter here at Lone Wolf Mountain right now. I could spend the rest of the day, a good part of the night, building my shelter, and if rain came in tonight, I would still get wet. That's the simple fact to it. Very few handmade shelters are 100% weatherproof, so keep that in mind. And also keep in mind what is realistically possible in terms of time. The next area of focus is along the lines of my philosophy when it comes to bushcraft, and it goes like this: do not be destructive. When it comes to practicing your bushcraft skills, you could very easily become a destructive element out there. You can cut down all of the trees to build a shelter, and personally that is not how I work. I'm not going to destroy the forest for the sake of a shelter that I'm going to use. I'm not going to scrape the bark off of a tree to make rope for that shelter and kill that tree. If I was in a survival situation, then it would be different. I would do what I have to do. I wouldn't ask any questions, and I wouldn't feel bad about it. But for your bushcraft adventures, for your bushcraft trips, it is, in my opinion, that you coexist. Do what's best for the forest. Of course, if it's your land and that's what you want to do it. But you should know there could be legal ramifications if you head out onto state property, government property, and whatnot. Imagine for a second if that everyone headed out into the forest and repeated what many other bushcraft channels show. The forests would be absolutely destroyed. So don't do that, folks. Next, when it comes to your outdoor trips, before you head out, make sure to research the area that you're going into. Research the flora and fauna so that you know what wildlife is there, what plants are there, what predators are there, what insects, what snakes, and so on. Next up is a very important topic of conversation that deals with wild edibles. A long time ago, I was working with a survival instructor, and he told me this: only an idiot would try to identify wild edibles with a book. This is pretty much universal knowledge when it comes to survival experts and anyone who's spent some time in the outdoors. There is no way to identify safely what you should eat or what you shouldn't by a few pictures or a little description in a book. I'm not personally aware of any book that covers the entire growth stages of fauna to the point where you can accurately distinguish one plant from another, one species from another. Trying to do so with a book is exceptionally dangerous, and people die from doing this. People become very sick from doing this. If you want to learn about wild edibles, you do so from a person, someone who can teach you and tell you about and show you every single stage of a plant's life cycle. Otherwise, you're playing a very dangerous game. It's funny, I have a friend who's very outdoorsy, and on his Instagram page, it was some years back, he had a picture of him with this mushroom, and it looked like he had taken a bite out of it. I'm familiar with many types of mushrooms, and with that one, if he had eaten even a bite of it, he probably would have died. So I sent him a message, and I was like, man, there's no way that you ate that. And he says, why is that? And I was like, because you replied to this message, man. And he's like, yeah, you're right, I didn't. And that's because you would have to be foolish to go around eating mushrooms or any other wild edible that you're not 100% sure of. Don't take any chances, folks. Going back to survival shows and whatnot, you have to remember that they have survival experts on hand telling them what to eat and what not to. And because of that, and in relation to bushcraft specifically, be extremely careful with what you eat and even with what you make tea out of. The next point that I need to mention is in regards to what you bring with you for your bushcraft trips. Every bushcraft kit is going to be unique. It's personal, and you should create it based upon your own skill sets in mind and no one else's. Some people confuse bushcraft with being 100% primitive, and that's not the case. That's not accurate. While there are many areas that overlap between the two, you are not limited in any way as to what you can bring and use on your trip. If you want to bring a tent, do it. If you want to bring a tarp, do it. If you want to make a shelter, do so. But make sure to give yourself plenty of time and have a backup plan. I talk about this because it's very difficult to get the balance right. It can be tough. In my opinion, it's always better to bring more gear than not to have enough. And when you're starting out, it can be impossible to know what you need and what you don't need. So take the supplies, take the gear with you, and it won't be long before you see for yourself what you need and what you don't. So this is the last tip that I have for you all that I will touch upon in this video, and it deals with this. For every trip that you go out on, focus on one specific area, and if you have enough time, of course, you can focus on other things. Now, what I'm talking about is this. If you want to focus on shelter building, focus on that. If it's primitive fire making, focus on that. If you're making a cup, a bowl, a spoon, focus on that. I say this because you will discover, again, that everything takes so much time to accomplish. Even the simplest of tasks can take a great amount of time. In this episode, I've gone over my bushcraft philosophy, and I've gone over tips and information that comes from experts like myself and from others. I would like to hear from you all. Comment down below, share your thoughts about this video, the tips that I've personally shared with you all, and share your own. We are a community of one. We are here to help each other out, so do so down below. I will have more episodes coming up in the future. Everyone take care, strength and honor. If you have a question, email me. Bye, everybody. By the way, everyone, you may have noticed that I've talked about bushcraft, primitive living skills, and survival in this episode, and that's because each skill set really is intertwined with each other. With your bushcraft skills, you practice those so that you can take care of yourself in the outdoors, and that's why I mentioned all three areas.